So nice to see you. Thank you all for turning out. We've been really getting the crowds for our speaker series, and I really appreciate your support. Welcome you all. My name is Vincent Rossi. I'm the coordinator for the speaker series program. I'm happy to have you here today for this very interesting topic. Let me just do a couple of quick things. I ask everyone to either turn off or mute your cell phones, which I just did after my wife reminded me. I want to point out, invite you to check out information on our website about upcoming events like the Vines and Vittles. Well, for the Pancake Breakfast, our 14th annual Pancake Breakfast for Memorial Day weekend, and the Vines and Vittles Festival, which will take place in July. You can find out more information about those. And we're busily preparing for those, and we're always lining up new speakers. And I will also mention that our next speaker in May 18th, will be Dr. Blaine Davies, talking about the Mexican War and how it transformed two nations. Very, very apropos to the history of our community in Rancho Bernardo. We're looking forward to that. And actually, I just got a commitment for June from Cindy Stankowski, Executive Director of the San Diego Archaeological Center. So we're lining up a very interesting and diverse program for all of you. And part of what we're doing here, all of our basic work is done by volunteers, and we rely on volunteer labor to keep our organization going. And if you'd like to help us and pitch in, please check out the information about membership in the society that we have available here on the tables and at our website. We also please invite you to check out after the program our cookies and bottled water for your convenience. Our speaker, I'm very happy today to host Mr. Max Kurillo, a well-known historian, recognized authority on the California mission period and on the Kings Road, El Camino Real, which was the original sort of spine of old California and continues to function as a highway today. And he's going to tell us about its history and development, and we look forward to that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Max Kurillo.
We're going to talk about El Camino Real of Nueva Alta, California, and the Camino Real bells from 1697 to 1941. Even the title brings up 2 or 3 questions, but we'll get to discuss the title at the end. There'll be plenty of time. To address the Camino Real, we have to go back to when Portola was governor of California. It wasn't Baja California, it wasn't Alta California, it was Can you see back there? Everybody see? Okay. And Portola is at Laredo, which is the capital, and he's now governor, and he gets the word that hey, take a detachment of troops and go up to a place called Monterey. Monterey, that's a long time ago and a long way off. So they decide that a trip has to be divided up into segments. So they're going to get resupplied at a place called Velicata. Velicata is the northernmost area that was discovered by the Jesuits, when the Jesuits had all of California. All these dots are Jesuit missions. And this one up here is Santa Maria, and that plays a pretty important part in our next slide. A resupply point at Velicata and another one at San Diego. That's all San Diego was to the Army, was a supply point to get to Monterey. We'll get to Monterey later. So in order to get all the supplies to Velicata, it would take a month to get up there. So Portola got all of his people together and said, we will requisition all the little boats that sort of belong to California. And these boats were the boats for the pearlers and the boats for the silver mines that were down in the southern part. So all these little boats came up and they got supplies at Laredo, and they took them up to Santa Maria in Bay of Gonzaga, and then went overland about 40 miles, and this big vast area of grasslands and rivers, and that was the ideal place to stage all the supplies for the next step, which would be San Diego. Also, the San Carlos left La Paz on the January 9th. San Carlos was supposed to go to Monterey and wait for the army as they came up. That's the dream. A month later, the San Antonio left at Cabo, and the San Jose. Now the San Jose, we don't know much about the San Jose. We have two choices. Either it was lost at sea, or the captain said, "The hell with it, I'm going to Hawaii for vacation." So the ships, here we have all the ships going back and forth to the Laredo, big ships leaving, and the next phase is what the Army does. Because the Jesuits had a road from Laredo all the way up to Villa Cata here, it was easy. And some of these roads, if you look at, not this is a very good, they're straight. The Jesuit made straight roads, and they had monuments at the foot of mountains or hills where you could see where the trail goes. From Villa Cata to San Diego, it was rough. This is taken from Harry Crosby's book, and this was 200 years after, and many things happened. Captain Rivera, who had lived in Laredo for 20 years and was in charge of the army during the Jesuits, took his men first, and they went up the trail, and they left Villa Cata March 24th. They came into San Diego May 14th.
Of what year?
1769.
Okay.
Then Portola was in Villa Cata. All this happened 1769. And at May 15th, and he was in San Diego July 1st. So now we have the Army, we have Rivera coming up to San Diego, and we pretty much finished with that. So let's go to San Diego and see what happened. On April 11th, the San Antonio, that had left in February, spent 57 days at sea and arrived April the 11th. And they sailed into the harbor. Said, "Where is everybody?" And so, with their 30 men aboard, about 28 of them had scurvy. And half of the crew was either laying around, couldn't do anything, or were dead. And they had 2 padres aboard, that's 11. On April 29th, 18 days later, the San Carlos come up. Now the San Carlos was in real bad shape because they had been 110 days at sea. And most of their 60 people aboard, 60 men aboard, were either incapacitated or dead. And so they had 1 padre aboard. So we have 2 ships now in San Diego. And probably out of the 90 men, 80 of them were dead or incapacitated to a point where they couldn't even walk. May 1st, just the next day, Lieutenant Fagus and 27 men that were healthy enough to walk, much less do anything else, went ashore for water and see what kind of supplies they could get. They found that there were trees there was beach there, and so they started bringing sail. They couldn't build anything, so they brought sailcloth and ropes and stretched it between the trees, and they had a tent. And they did that quite frequently. That was May 1st, 1769. 14 days later, Captain Rivera comes in with 58 of his men. So we have a total population of, with 30 of his men, we have a population of 58. So we have to build more shelters, and since we have 3 padres now, you get 3 padres together, you're going to have a church. So what's the building material? Canvas. So they built the canvas, and they brought everybody off of the ships, even the dead. They had them wrapped up in canvas. I don't see any report of them burial at sea, so I assume that they were aboard the ship. And 30, 40 dead bodies around, not very pleasant. So they had a hospital, and Rivera organized the Presidio. He did preliminary layout of the Presidio. They had quarters. He did a lot. He organized them. When he first came there and he looked around, he said, "What, no Taco Bell?" And his men were starving also. So they took all the supplies off of the ships and stored them. And here, when they store them, you have to cover the ground with canvas, and you got to have protection. So they used a lot of sailcloth, a lot of ropes. They stripped the San Carlos. The only 2 people were still alive on that San Carlos, and that wasn't about the sail. So they stripped it. They didn't dismantle it. Last time I talked, the next speaker misrepresented. He said they dismantled it. No, they stripped it. They took the candles, the lanterns, their tools, all the bedding, the pots and pans and the dishes, their maps, and their signal flags. I'll tell you about the signal flags later. So they had a pretty good encampment there. 61 days later, we're dating from May the 1st, Portola arrives with 35 men and 5 padres. Wow, we have a lot of padres there, with a population of about 100. So once again, we have to have more shelters and more canvas and more chairs and stools and more cooking equipment. And the padres looked around and said, we got to enlarge our church now. So canvas was changed, and a lot of things happened. 70 days later, what happened here was Portola knew the San Carlos couldn't sail. So he talked to Captain Villa, and he says, "I'll give you 10 of my men." And the captain said, "Look, we need navigators, we need bosuns, we need mates. These are soldiers, they're not sailors." So Captain Villa of the San Carlos got aboard the San Antonio, and they left, and they went to Mexico to get new supplies. Captain Villa went to Mexico City to recruit people for his ship. He wanted to get his men and his ship out of there, and he knew what was going to happen. He saw what was happening. They were stripping it. So The San Antonio left for San Blas to get resupplied. The San Carlos is still in port. They're living in tents here. And 75 days later, Portola leaves for Monterey with about 40 men. That relieved the congestion, and the San Carlos is still in port. And that's 75 days later. 78 days later, Sarah decides that the existing church that they had should be dedicated as a mission. And so that is how we got the first mission dedication. Then they got more shelters in San Carlos and port.
So he arrived by ship, right?
Pardon?
He arrived by ship. Sarah, it's your first reference to Sarah.
Sarah came with Portola. Sarah came with Portola, yeah.
Okay.
The three padres came by ship before him. And you get padres together, they're going to build a church. So Sarah didn't have to build anything. It was already there. He just said, hey, you know, this is I'm going to dedicate this as a mission. Now that was his second mission. I'm getting off a little bit here. That was his second mission. Mission San Diego was not the first Franciscan. The first Franciscan mission was Delicata. Remember that? The supply point? That was first Franciscan mission, and it lasted only like 5 years. And the Dominicans that came in as the Jesuits had all these missions. The Jesuits were exiled, they went to Spain, whatever they did. Then the Franciscans came in. And the Franciscans then said, we want to go north. And as they went north, the Dominicans came in to take over all the Jesuits in other areas. So that's how all this came about. And the San Carlos still in port. Sarah, Portola and Rivera, an expeditionary force, went up the coast, and they found Monterey Bay, but they didn't recognize it. So that little red area up here, they call that, oops, we went too far. But on the way down, they did place a marker on Monterey Bay. Some people said it's a cross, some said stones, so whatever it was a marker. And he came back down almost the same route as he took going up. They spent 254 days on that round trip and 1,270 miles. That's a long way. I've driven it, and the San Carlos is still in port. Now the San Antonio comes back in March of 1770, and they brought a crew for the San Carlos, but they couldn't sail right away. They had to get some rope. They had to get the rope from ashore and some sailcloth and a few other things. On April of 1770, San Antonio goes to Monterey with Sarah and their other groups. And the San Carlos is still in port. In April 1770, Portola goes back to Monterey. Rivera goes down south to Laredo to get supplies, and the San Carlos finally sails out of San Diego Harbor. Now let's go and see what happens up north. Portola arrived at Monterey on May 24th, 1770, claiming Monterey as the capital of Nueva California. Now, Nueva California, remember we had that in the title? Mm-hmm. That is a proper name, because all the official documents to and from the king and the viceroy contained Nueva California. That was the proper name. Nueva Velicata, north, Nueva California. The Velicata south, it was Antigua, California. So we'll discuss this Alta California shortly, I hope. And May 31st, Sarah's group came up here, 47 days at sea, in which most of the crew, if not all, including the Padres, had a touch of scurvy. And the Camino Real continued to serve as a road from Velicata down here, all the way up to San Diego and north to Monterey. End of Camino Real. Camino Real only went to Monterey, no other place. No branches out to places. And that continued on through the early Mexican period. And by 1830, 100 years off, 1830, Mexico was in the midst of purging written documents, Spanish written documents. And they removed the word real and any reference to the king. And some of them just scratched that out, others scratched the whole thing out, and a few documents, they actually cut the word real out of the paper. So that's how they were a republic, they were not a kingdom. We have no more Camino Real. That's the end of it. That ends the Camino Real. 74 years later, a group of historians and publicists and clubs got together, and they said, in Los Angeles, this all happened in Los Angeles, and they said, we have to, there's visitors coming from the East Coast and all over, and we have to increase our visitor facilities here. We have to give them a little more than the ocean and nice hotels and the palm trees and the weather. And so we'll direct them to these missions. We'll drive by and let them see these adobe ruins. And then they said, why not on the Camino Real? They spent 2 years trying to find a trace of it. No trace could be found. A lot of, yeah, here it is over here. And you look at it, and it's a 2-lane, like a wheeled road. It's been there ever since I've known them. But a wheeled road means that it dates back to 1850. Because 1850 is the time where the first wheeled vehicles came into California. So when somebody says, yeah, this is the original road here in wheeled vehicle, you know that dates back no further than maybe 1850. The road right next to San Juan Bautista, that's all grown over now. They claim that was the original road, but nobody could prove it. So now they let it grow over and they don't talk about that anymore. So as a result of the meeting.
So basically all travel was on foot or on horseback?
Very good question. I missed that. Let's go back. Let's go back to Portola coming up. And when he got word that they were to go to Monterey, the representative of the king wrote down, these are the rules that you will go by when you go into Nueva California. He covered everything. And rule number 10 was translated as you shall not expose yourself. Now, wait a minute. But what they meant, this is a language difficulty, what they meant is you should not put yourself in a position of danger. And you cannot outrun a mountain lion, you can't outrun a bear, you can't outrun an Indian. So what do? You ride a horse, or a donkey, or you ride something. Because the Indians never seen horses or donkeys. So they're afraid of them. Now the animals would, I don't know what they're. So, getting back here, they said, we can advertise this now as come to California and walk in the footsteps of the Padres on a new El Camino Real of California. This was thought up by the group. This was run by the help of the highway department, and that's what we have today.
But with the original road, I mean, it seems hard to believe over 1,000 miles they actually went to the trouble of constructing a road. I assume it was more a trail or a route that they took, and there may have been some visibility based on horses or whatever, but they didn't actually build a road, did they?
It's called a road. You're right. It was a trail. A trail can be just a trail here, it could be a trail there, but terminology over the years, we call it El Camino Real. What is it? A trail or a road or what?
But did they physically construct it, or it was just because you
It's a
go over it enough that eventually...
It was a pathway. It's made up of, according to the diaries, it's made up of Indian and animal trails that were modified and branched out into it and go over the mountains. And so it wasn't anything original that Portola thought up in his own mind.
Are there in any of these diaries references to them clearing, moving path, or?
Portola brought about 22 Indians from Baja California, Antigua, California, up to do the labor work of clearing the trail. Modern historians have taken that Indians and said they're local Indians. Local Indians do not know, at that time, did not know how to use a metal shovel or pick or pry bar. They didn't have metal, so how could they do it? But the Indians that cleared the pathway and kept it clear were probably the first 15, 20 years were Indians from what we call now Baja California. You have a question?
Yeah, well, what is the origin of the word California?
That dates back to an article, I can't pronounce the Spanish words, but an article that someone wrote about it's in my book, about the Amazon women of California and all, it's gold and silver, and he called it Caliph, and it got translated into California. If you get my book, you'll get a whole chapter on that.
So when you're talking about the king, that was a Spanish king? Or
A Spanish king, yeah.
So what were they doing in Mexico?
Mexico did away with the word king, and because they're a republic, they're not a kingdom.
So who was the last king that ruled?
I'm not sure. I'm not up on Spanish history yet. I'm not sure who.
Well, was it Maximilian?
Pardon?
Maximilian?
I'm not sure in Spanish history, but so we now have a Camino.
I'll talk about it next month.
Pardon?
I can talk about that next month. It's not doing lecture next month.
So we have a Camino Real that was thought up in by a group of people. And what is a road, famous road without markers? So these markers were put on the road starting in 1906. And you can see the different signs. This is not original signs. This is probably a 1920, 1930 sign. This one is fairly recent. This one is 1996 sign. And this is an original sign. And you wonder, who thought this up? Where were they made? Well, they were designed and made by this lady right here and her husband, Mr. and Mrs. Forbes. And they had a foundry. And he died, and so she continued on the foundry. And here she is casting a bell. She did the work herself. And she found that she couldn't make a living making these big bells. So she designed and made and cast hundreds of smaller bells. There's about 200 different sizes and types of bells, from 1.5 ounces up to 200 pounds. And she sold these. She was the first souvenir vendor of the early 1900s. And so she sold these throughout California, tens of thousands of them. And a Camino Real bell during this period was like $27, including the staff and a sack of cement. It now goes for about $2,400. And
What area was that foundry in? What part of California? LA or?
that foundry, the best that we can do it, it was on the eastern campus of USC. And it's all covered up now with concrete and whatever is on the campus. There was another foundry that's closed now, and in Carson that made bells. I visited a few times, and they're even closed. So all of this is, you have to dig through history to find it.
But bottom line is that route that they marked with all the commemorative stuff, you think they're kind of guessing as to where it actually was? They don't know for sure?
They don't know for sure. This is all brand new. This is a brand new El Camino Real. No, the only resemblance is that they're parallel somewhere. They go from San Diego to Monterey. Now, as you drive over the highway, from here to a couple of bells are in Hamilton, up through over Caneo Grade and to Camarillo, Oxnard, Ventura, Santa Barbara, on up, you'll find a variety of bells. Mrs. Forbes' bell is probably the most famous here. You'll see quite a few of these. They're painted green, and they're on a 11-foot staff. It goes up 11 feet. And you say, well, aren't those the ones that people steal?
Yeah.
Well, okay. You have to have a ladder. And this bell is 18 inches in diameter, about 18 inches high, so you have to reach over. So you're standing on an 8-foot ladder, 10-foot ladder, reaching over, and you have these 3/4-inch bolts holding them together, and they're torqued down to 100 pounds. So you're reaching over, you're trying to get these, and once you get them loose, and you pull these bolts out, this bell weighs 92 pounds, and it's going to come down. Or you're going to be on a ladder carrying this 92-pound bell. You're not going to do it. What this was all about is when Caltrans made a new road or they widened the road, they just plow these under. And A lot of them are just buried. People come and pick them up, take them out, and the Caltrans did. Who belonged to them? No name tag on them, and it wasn't the responsibility of Caltrans to save them, and now it is. So those still exist. Now about 1970, Caltrans said, we want to install these bells along the highway. Where do we get them? Well, Mrs. Forbes had passed away 20 years before, and her factory went through various ownerships, and it was lost. So they said, okay, let's put this out for bid. And a fellow by the name of Justin Kramer won the contract, and he made these plain bells like this. You'll see a lot of them on the highway. Of course, you have to slow down to about 40 miles an hour. And then he had a modification. This is an insert, and these bells are for what we call Baja California. We put 4 of them in so far. Then about 1980, California, state of California says, oh, we went in on this plan. So they came up with a design, like this first one here, and then they took a Justin Kramer bell up here, and they put property of the state of California around the top of it. This is the eye that you fasten. And then they said, well, when you're approaching these, you can only see the name from one side, so we will make a bell with double-sided dates and names. So there's only one of those in existence. And so that was fine. And in 1990, they said, whoa, wait a minute, this is costing us too much money. What can we do that would cost less and we can still have the same effect? So they started making concrete bells. And they used this bell here as a pattern, you can see that. And they used a Justin Kramer bell as this bell. There's others that I haven't booked there. But these are the primary bells you'll see along the highway, as you can slow down from 75 to 40 miles an hour, you can see them. All of them are listed in here, plus the pathways that were recognized as the Camino Real, and also the maps, Mexican maps of what used to be the Camino Real, and they called it El Camino, and that's during the Mexican period, and they've never been published before. I had the honor being the first one. Are there any questions?
Yes. Yes, okay. If I understood you correctly, the original Camino Real of the 18th century only went up to Monterrey, correct?
Correct. From
Okay,
Laredo
Right.
to Monterrey.
Okay. So at what point was it extended to go all the way up the peninsula, San Francisco, and further north?
After 1830. 1830, it was wide open. Roads
So
went
it was
every place.
Yeah.
But it never went to Camino Real. The modern Camino Real that we have today has been documented from the Mission San Diego. This is California government. From the Mission San Diego to San Francisco Bay. And you can see that. The Mission has a plaque on that. You know, from, well, which is wrong. It goes from San Diego up to Monterey. Then after 1830, it wasn't anymore. And the new Camino Real that was set up in 1904 to 1906 actually went to Sonoma. So it went all the way around. It connected all the missions.
That's a good point. One thing of note is the missions were built by the Spanish, and Mexico gets independence in 1821, so anything after that would have had to have been done by the Mexican.
The Mexican Franciscans.
Right.
Yeah, we claim that we only have 21 missions. We have 22 Franciscan missions, but let's forget about Baja. In 1805, when Santa Ynez Mission was founded, that was the last Spanish Franciscan mission. In December of 1805, Mexican government says we will recognize California as Alta California. Then it became official, Alta California. Before that, it was like calling this the Golden State, the Apple State, the whatever. It was like a slang name. And how they came about that, nobody really knows. I can't tie down any historians. So I came up with my own idea. They started using Alta California about 1772, 73. That's after the third and fourth mission had been established. At that time, the military gave the Padres very little help. Very little. There was a division between the religious and the military. And so, to set themselves apart from the military government, you need a new name. So the Padres thought up Alta California. It means about the same thing. And they propagated that in all of their missions that they founded. And that Alta California then became so popular that people think that was a proper name. But the proper name actually until the Mexican period was Nueva California.
Apropos of names, and just to remind, when you talked about the Mexican Republic revolted against Spain and became independent, and they took the king's name out of it. And there's another example in our county history here. There was a rancho called Rancho del Rey, which once the Mexican government came into power, said we don't want the ranches of the king. It becomes Rancho de la Nación, ranch of the nation, which became national city.
I'm affiliated with San Pascual Battlefield, and so I tell our visitors that the first mission was established in San Diego, the second one was Carmel, so it would be Monterrey, right?
The second one was Monterey.
Was Carmel, yes.
Yes.
And so, and then that those missions would be established, something like a day's horseback ride from one another. And you don't think it's correct?
The first mission was in San Diego.
Yes.
The second mission was in Monterey.
Right.
Now, at 65 miles an hour, I can't even make it in one day, much less a horse ride. The next one was 70 miles south of Carmel and San Antonio. That's 2 days trip. They can't do that in one day. After 19 missions were established, Santa Ynez was the 19th mission. After Santa Ynez was established, on the 22nd of June, with a strong horse and rider, you could go from one mission to the other in a day. But that is a fallacy that has been propagated, that they were 1 day apart. When I mentioned that, San Diego and then Carmel, all of a sudden a light comes on in people's mind and they say, oh yeah, you can do that in one day.
Yeah, but then also traffic increased because in commerce, this is, to me, it's a little bit not quite fathomable that no traces would be found of El Camino Real, because I thought that more commerce would take place. The missions became also, putting up people overnight.
Yeah.
So I thought there would be, some remnants would be visible of the increased traffic.
If you look under the, if you look at the population growth from 1850, in the Bay Area, every 10 years it doubled. So by the time the surveyors, when we became a state, the Congress appointed surveyors to come out to California and to map all of California. They sent 4. And they started at the border in Mexico. So it took them 70 years to do it, and they still weren't finished. But they had a lot of contractors. But as they went up, you could trace a trail up as far as San Luis Obispo. And that trail is just drawn by hand. And so it could be any place. And above San Luis Obispo, the population increased so fast. And when you buy a piece of land, you want to put a shopping center or a road or a school or houses on it. And it was your land. Hey, you don't encroach on my property. Anything on my property, if I don't want it, I'm covering it up. And it could have been the Camino Real. So people have destroyed history.
Getting back to the time that it takes to ride from one mission to the next in the early period, were there additional corrals between the missions for changing horses and things like that?
Each mission had mission lands. And one of the largest was in San Gabriel. They had 250,000 acres. And from mission to mission, they meant from mission building to mission building. And you just couldn't, a regular rider just couldn't do it in a day.
And that's why I think there were corrals just like when you read about the stage lines, and there were like every 20, in the stage route from San Diego to Escondido, every 20 miles there were stations which included corrals for changing horses, because horses would, and apropos of just, I remember reading a book by Mr. Nordhoff in 1874 about California for visitors, and he came up with an estimate of speed riding a horse, and I think he said 12 to 14 miles an hour max was riding.
And you can only do that for so long. The horse drops dead.
So the foresters who owned Camp Pendleton before it was a rancho, they had a big cross up on the hill, so they were kind of like a day's ride from the mission south, San Luis Rey, and they were always having visitors and exchanging
Right. That was 2 days from, at least 2 days from San Luis Rey to Capistrano.
No, this is in between the actual Adobe.
Oh, yeah.
So that was about 1 day, and then it was
Yeah,
another
right,
day up to there.
Yes.
I'm new to the state, so is the Camino Real, is there a highway, like a highway,
Today?
Yeah.
It's 101 highway
Okay.
that goes up. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is Sarah's church. We read that it was made of sticks. Timber is one word, sticks and lumber, all different words meaning different things. And you have to go back and think like the old Spanish did. The eyes are deceiving. We have a picture here of Rivera taking a Indian out of church. Look at that, that's made of timber. I've counted all the timbers here and approximated it's about 120 vertical poles put in. These are poles or timber. And where they're going to get them from, and how they put them into the ground. Because you got to remember, the only tools they had was what they took off the ships. The Army didn't have saws and hammers and chisels, so you're going to get a ladder. Okay, let's say you got a ladder, and you got a 9-foot pole, you got a mallet, and you're driving it into the ground. You ever drove something into the ground around it? It can't be done. So they made ditches. They could have made a ditch and put them up, all line them. Then they would have to, they're all which way, they have to straighten them up. And they had thatched roofs. Who put thatched roofs on? Soldiers didn't know how to do that. So
What year is this picture?
what year? 1769.
So that's the mission in San Diego?
Well, this is an artist's idea of it, but we're actually, that's the church. The padres are there in the background, whether that's their mission or that's where they live, I'm not sure. But this was a church building here. And so, as a few obscure references say that Sarah didn't have any decorations in the church, and he decorated it with flags and maps. Okay. So, let's take a possibility, assumption. He had canvas. We knew they had canvas, so he put canvas up and the canvas down on the sides, and it had an entrance, and these are rough drawings. This first one has a wide opening, and this one has a little door here, and this one has a lot of little colorful things. If you remember, I said they took signal flags. He put signal flags up because they're colorful. Those of you who've been in the Navy know all kinds of color. And what does that create? A stained glass window, because a light comes through there. Now, how about this little idea that it was made of sticks? Well, if you go back far enough in camping and the military, you know, if you have canvas and you sew sticks onto the canvas, and sailors knew how to sew, so that's nothing. And you look at it and you say, hey, that's a building made of sticks. So what interpretation of sticks are we going to have? And then the openings would be the signal flags. And they did say one thing, though, that they brought a cannon ashore. I'd include that because it's incidental, but we can talk about cannon. These guys could hardly walk. And they bring in this big old cannon. Where they landed was somewhere around where the airport is in San Diego. That was all sloping sand beach. Have you ever drug something weighing 200-300 pounds of little round wheels like this through the sand? That's hard to do. So it wasn't a big cannon. It was what they called signal cannon. They carried about a 1 pound, 1.5 pound, that they could signal other ships, or they could, if they wanted to tie up to another ship, they shot the line over and they pull them together. So ladies and gentlemen, it's been quite nice talking with you. Here's some books back there. Any other questions? Thank you very much.